Hi guys, I'm Lily and I am a music education student here at Georgia State University. Today I'm going to be talking about how to get a flute. So in my last video I talked a little bit about the flute lingo, like the specifications, what to listen for when you get a flute. So now I want to go a little bit more in depth. So feel free to fast forward through this video depending on what kind of flute you're looking for. So first we're gonna talk beginner, like as in I am in 6th grade, I made the brilliant decision to join band and play flute, and I'm looking for a instrument. Well, my advice to you, young friend, would be to get any flute you can get your hands on. And most schools should have rental instruments that you can use free of cost usually. But if they don't, or some schools, their flutes need a little love, and in which case, go to your local music store, say, I would like to get a flute, or I would like to rent. Some music places have rent to buy, where you pay by month, and then if one day you say, hey, flute's not for me, you don't need to pay for the rest of the instrument. Definitely, you want to get an instrument with that's good quality, but honestly, get a flute, get anything you can put your hands on just to start, bare minimum start. Okay, so now we're going to talk actual beginner flutes. So these flutes are going to be nickel silver or silver plated, same thing. And they're going to be closed hole. Usually you will you'll rarely find a closed hole flute with Y arms or pointed arms. So usually it'll be closed hole with Y arms. Remember, it'll look something like this, except instead of these holes here, they will just be covered. It should be a C foot joint, which remember looks like this. And just your basic flute. I do not have my beginner flute with me, but my first flute was a Gemeinhardt. Here are some of the brands I would recommend looking at. Gemeinhardt is really good. I think that they make a really solid beginner flute. I think Yamaha is an excellent place to look for a beginner flute. I think that older brands like Artley I think got discontinued, but they make a really nice flute. Armstrong is good. Trevor James, I used to play this flute. It's Trevor James flute, and I love it dearly. And I didn't play their beginner models, but I'll get into this flute later. But it's a really, really great flute, and I know that they're a really great solid brand. Pearl, this one's a Pearl. Pearl doesn't make a lot of beginner ones, but yeah, so I would mainly look Gemeinhardt, Yamaha, Armstrong if you can find one, Artley if you can find one. I've heard of people playing Selmer flute. Selmer is a clarinet maker, but they make flutes apparently now. It's one of those, cautiously look into, but I've seen people play on those. So now, maybe you're in 8th grade, freshman, sophomore, you're getting more advanced. So now you need an intermediate. So this is where my Pearl flute comes in. So you're going to want, at the very least, a solid silver head joint. Most beginner flutes have just a silver plated head joint, which is good because silver plated, nickel silver, those are light materials and they just make it really easy to get a sound. But now that you are more advanced, you want a solid silver head joint, because the head joint, if you're going to upgrade anything, you want to upgrade the head joint because that's where a lot of your sound is produced. So yeah, so the body, it can be solid silver, it can be silver plated. It's honestly what's ever in your budget. And same thing with the Y arms versus pointed arms. it really, personal preference, whatever is in your budget. You will want an open hole flute, because at this point you should have, you know, the hang of flute. Again, inline or offset G, doesn't matter. You're going to want, honestly, this part is up to you. Intermediate flutes in general, it's all about like, where are you at? What's your budget? Where do you see yourself? And so honestly, when I got this flute, like my flute, so quick PSA, do not get an ISO, an instrument shaped object. If you find a flute that's from a brand that you've never heard of, make sure you do your research. I played a Mandarin flute, and if you're like, wait, Mandarin makes flutes? Apparently they tried. They make violins, and the flute just was not made very well, and so literally it was breaking. So that's where this flute came in. Yeah, so this is a C foot. Honestly, I think that C foots are good for intermediate models, just because, you know, you really don't need a B foot until like college when you get your full range. But I think that, you know, C's, it really, really doesn't matter. Really, you just want to make sure that you have your solid silver head joint and your silver plated body. So as far as brands go for like this kind of intermediate flute, I played a pearl when I was in this bracket, and I loved my pearl. It's a solid flute, and yes, they're known for their drums, but their flutes are really high quality, really nice. Yamaha is still in the game. Artley's still in the game. Armstrong, maybe. What others? Now is this level, I think you might want to at least look into some of the Amadeus series by Haynes and the Sonare by Powell. However, let me say this, like, I played a Mandarin flute. Like, it was an off-brand flute. Like, do not get an off-brand. And, you know, Haynes and Powell, who are kind of like the mother companies of Amadeus and Sonare, those are really high quality instruments. Basically what they do is they make the body in overseas, factory made, and then the head joint is the high quality, which is good. But for me personally, like, I know people who play both series and they love them, but personally I was always very wary of them because of my experience with the off-brand flute. So I would say try them out, ask around, ask your teachers, and see if it's right for you. It wasn't right for me, but I know that they're good flutes. Yeah, so now we're going to talk more advanced intermediate to like pre-professional kind of flutes. So this is where my Trevor James comes in. So this is where you want to get a solid silver flute, with the caveat of like again, I play a silver plated flute, and it's not that my solid silver flute caused my hand issues by any means. My hand issues came from a multitude of things, but having a solid silver flute, especially when I'm playing 50 million hours, even with the correct positioning, it just doesn't help the issue. And like, even now, you know, I haven't even been playing it for very long, and I can feel the pain creeping up. So don't, yeah, but general rule of thumb, you wanna look at the solid silver flutes. So and also you want to get a B foot joint so that you can go all the way up to that super high D. I know that was such a beautiful sound, but like having that B foot really helps there. You also, like, that's really the only thing you really need. I will say, if you decide to go the silver plated route for whatever reason, make sure that it's from a good brand. Like, I play a Haynes silver plated flute. I play a Haynes Q1. That's not like your run of the mill, like, you know, beginner level silver plated flute, you know? So you want to make sure that it's quality over quantity, you know? You don't want to, just because you get an expensive flute doesn't mean that it's the flute for you. And similarly, you know, if the flute that really speaks to you is a silver plated flute, or maybe it's, you know, this flute really spoke to me and it's like it's an intermediate model flute, and it spoke to me as my professional, you know, like pre-professional college forever flute, you know? So it's all about what speaks to you. Some brands, definitely Trevor James. Trevor James, like the sound is like butter. It's just so smooth and easy and controlled, and just such a beautiful, luscious sound. I'll probably do a quick video once I get my Haynes back, just demonstrating that a bit. But yeah, but the Trevor James, like, it's just such a smooth, rich sound. They're hard to find in the US because they're a British company, but if you can get your hands on one, they're really nice. Haynes, of course. Powell and Haynes are like the two like competitors. Powell doesn't have, as far as I know, I think that they don't, like, Haynes has like their Q series, which is kind of like, if you want something, if you don't want the Amadeus line, but you also don't want to spend a lot of money to get a custom flute, it's kind of that. Powell, they might have something like that, but if they do, I do not know about it. When I go back and edit this video, I'll let you guys know. So Powell, it might be a little harder to find one in your budget. That doesn't mean they don't exist. And yeah, so Muramatsu is probably going to be in this group of flutes that you might be in your budget. Muramatsu, really expensive. They, like, I looked into their silver plated flute because they have a really nice silver plated flute, and it starts at like $5,000. I'm like, that is way more than I want to spend. But you know, if you can find one used, or if that's in your budget, great flute. Again, it's one of those examples of it's silver plated, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad flute, or B, you know, like a beginner flute, you know, or like a flute that you won't be able to play as a professional. What others? There's, of course, altus. I know a lot of people who play on an altus. They're beautiful flutes. And Yamaha makes a really good flute, honestly, at any age level. Miyazawa is another one. Still a good professional model. Burkhardt is really, honestly, I won't even bother talking about them because they start, yeah, they're expensive. Mateki, if you can find a Mateki flute, they're a reputable brand. I've never played on one. But I know that they're reputable. And I'll list some other names of reputable brands. Artley, I don't think they make a lot of professional, like pre-professional, advanced, intermediate type flutes, because they're an old company. But if you can find one, they're another good brand. Now, just quickly, I'm going to just talk a little bit about where to get your flute. Honestly, if you just put the brand of the flute that you want in Google, you'll find several options. I got my Trevor James actually from a random music store in Evansville, Indiana, and just from typing it in on Google and like checking it religiously to see any new listings. My one caveat is, like, if you do like what we did, make sure that the seller is legit. So what you do, call them. If they answer, that will tell you that. Check their website. If their website looks sketchy, probably sketchy. And look up reviews. And yeah, so then you can also look at Flute World, Flute Center of New York, Flutatious, which is like the Flute Center of New York, but in San Francisco, like Flute Pro Shop in Boston. Like, there's so many reputable flute shops, Again, you might want to shoot them an email or call them, just make sure that they're legit. But yeah, and I got my Haynes on eBay, which I know it's not something you should necessarily do, but again, like I would recommend getting a used flute because you can get a really great deal. All three of my flutes, like I got great deals on them. And my one thing with eBay, number one, make sure that it's important to make sure that the seller is reputable. eBay is good because they have like a whole, they usually have a buyer protection where if like you don't get the item or the item is like not as described, usually you can return it, but you want to look into that. Again, you want to message the seller, ask for pictures, just make sure that they're legit. I will say this though, like my flute needed a lot of work done to it, and like I knew this going in, but even still, you know, looking back, you know, if I were to have purchased this flute through like Flute Center of New York or something, it might have been a little bit easier just because they would have done the repairs in-house versus, because honestly, like I was lucky enough to find a flute repair lady here in the metro Atlanta area, but finding a reputable repair person to do that kind of work on your flute is really hard to find. So in that respect, you know, it would have been better to look on like Flute Center of New York. But honestly, like I am so happy that I got my flute the way that I did. Cause like we even upgraded the pads and the lady did such a beautiful job. She's actually the one who has my flute right now. So yeah, it's just about making sure that the seller is legit, making sure that you as a buyer have protection, and also just that like, you know, you can find the best deal that you can. So I hope that this video was helpful and will help guide you guys when you're getting your flute. If you have questions, please feel free to let me know. And I also, like, I just want to put this out there that the flute will choose you. You can't say, oh, I'm going to get this kind of flute. Like, it needs to speak to you. Definitely 100% try before you buy. With COVID, it might be a little hard, but I know that a lot of places usually do trials where they might put a hold on your credit card for the full amount and then refund you once they get the instrument back, so that it's not like, oh, like you stole our flute, because that would not be good. Or you can go into a store to buy it. I was lucky enough to go to the Midwest Clinic as a sophomore with my high school. So I tried my flute there. I know that, I think they usually have like some sort of a flute convention in Atlanta. And if you just trying a flute is just not feasible for you, just do your research, figure out what's going to work for me, because what works for me might not work for you. One of my best friends here plays a Gemeinhardt, and like she sounds gorgeous. It works for her. Gemeinhardt doesn't really work for me, So it's all personal preference. So, just do you, fam. Like, figure out what's going to make you successful. And remember, getting a better flute does not automatically make you a better player, and the player makes the flute does not make the player. And just remember, be safe, make sure your seller's credible, and yeah, good luck.